Hello, my name is Grace,
My name is Paula.
and we're going to be discussing the question, how is the internet changing the way we date and connect with romantic partners? So the big kind of overarching answer to that question, I guess, is like online dating in general. I guess you could argue that like social media and text messaging and things like that play a role in it as well, which they do. But I think what's had the largest impact on that is just online dating in general. Um, Actually, in a Pew Research study, Vogel and McLean shared that 1 in 3 adults in America have been on online dating apps, which I think is really interesting. I think there's a lot more prevalence than we necessarily expect.
Yeah, I always thought it was just a very small amount of people who were in that.
Yeah, especially like given that it's more popular in this generation. I feel like other generations tend to not meld with it as well, you know. But looking a little bit at the history of it a little bit, online dating became much more popular a lot more quickly in queer communities. It was actually the number one way that queer people met since like I want to say 1990, and it's just continued to rise from there. It didn't become quite as popular with heterosexual couples until like the early 2000s, and then that did also see like a pretty rapid just like upward incline. But yeah, now it's in the top 2 ways that homosexual couples in America meet. And also in the Pew Research study, they found that adults who have internet are a lot more likely to have a romantic partner. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. So I think a question that just naturally bridges off of that is what popularized online dating. One of the biggest things that makes online communication so convenient is the asynchronous element of it. So I don't have to wait until someone's up at like 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. to receive my phone call. I can give them a text. I don't have to send a letter. No pigeons needed. Was it owls? Well, I guess it was owls in Harry Potter.
Harry Potter was owls.
Anywho, but it's a lot faster, and you don't have to wait on a time where both people or all parties of the interaction are available and ready to have the conversation, I guess. Another thing that's really popularized it for sure is the options and convenience of online dating, just because before that you were really just kind of stuck with your own like pre-existing social market. So for example, if I didn't have like access to online dating, my availability to find partners would consist of Noodles and Company staff. No, that wouldn't work for me personally, so that would be a strikeout. And walking around on campus, which let me tell you, no one speaks to anyone. They really don't. It's quite intimidating to say words to anyone, let alone, hey, you're cute, let's go out. It's just not natural. It doesn't typically happen. So I think mine would be drowned out. What do your social spheres look like without online dating?
Same, my place of work. You guys, because I spend a lot of the time here.
Yeah,
I
just the
go to
apartment.
work. Otherwise, campus, and that's it.
Yep. Very little interaction on campus too.
Yes.
Yep. It's painful, truly. So it is very helpful that online dating gives the options and convenience to find people outside of one's pre-existing like social market so easily, like in a device that fits into your hand. It's crazy. But I think this is especially important for some other communities too, like people that face their markets for partners might include older adults like 40s and 60s and such. There's not as many people in that age range necessarily looking for a relationship. A lot of them have already gotten into committed relationships. And then same can also be true for like gay and queer communities. Because if you don't know if someone's gay, going up to them is like double possibility of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
It doubles any nervousness, any second guessing that you might have. Coming from a queer person, I don't know how to ask out a girl, I'll be very honest. But an online dating app, I could totally slide into a girl's DMs.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you like me, I like you. You like women, I like women. How beautiful. What a beautiful thing. But yeah, just going off of that, there's also a lot more niche dating sites that kind of gather a specific kind of person looking for like maybe like-minded people that have some same values, religious orientation, anything like that. I found some just to bring on example. Farmersonly.com. That one sounds quite appealing. Hey, if you want like sheeps and goat in your life,
I do.
I mean, maybe they're just a corn farmer, but there's possibilities that they also have farm animals. And we live in Wisconsin. Should that be shared on the internet? Anyways. But there's another one called Christian Mingle that is gauged towards Christian people. I really like the innocence of the word mingle. It seems fitting for Christian Mingle. And then there's Grindr, which is kind of like a hookup app for gay men. That one was actually really popular. Well, it still is, but it was also really popular kind of in the part we discussed before like heterosexual couples like really popularized online dating. It was popular in the sphere of like queer people first.
So it's one of the founding
exactly
dating apps.
Yep. Another one is Lucid, which is a sober friendly dating app. So if you're recently like if you're recently quitting a substance or just deciding to be sober, whatnot, that would be a good place. I feel like if I were sober, I would want a sober friendly space to find other people. There's Vegally, which I was kind of surprised about. I don't think I've ever, maybe I haven't dated any vegetarians because the vegetarians want to date the other vegetarians.
That makes sense.
Gosh darn it. Well, you won't see me on Vegally. I like bacon too much. And then this one's for you. Bristler, for beard havers and beard lovers. She's a beard lover.
I'm the beard lover, not the haver, but...
I'm the beard haver. No, I'm not. But, yeah, you can find your beards on there. I'll stay away from the beards on there.
I hope they have mustaches, too.
I don't think I've ever seen a person with a straight-up beard without mustache. Have you?
No.
Right? Isn't that kind of interesting?
They always have the full set.
There's another kind of site that's kind of interesting. They have a very big claim. Some sites claim that they can use science and their like algorithm to predict like your best matches or the people that you're like most compatible with. And that'd be nice.
That sounds easy.
Right, like I'll just put in my information and the internet will kind of like deliver my perfect man. How cool. How cool would that be?
It's kind of like that scene in Clueless where she just opens up her closet.
Exactly.
And chooses an outfit.
Yep. I'm just going to give you all this information about myself and then I expect to fall in love. So, obviously with such big claims, I wanted to look into a study that kind of like investigated this more. I actually listened to a podcast prior to this that kind of talked about the same topic called Science Versus, which is a podcast presented by Gimlet. The one in specific that I was listening to was called Online Dating, Can Science Find You Love? And that's where I found this study. So an associate professor of psychology at University of California named Paul Eastwig had a study where they gathered, I think it was around 350 undergraduate students who filled out these questionnaires and like personality surveys and whatnot just to gauge this information. Some of the questions were like, what do you look for in an ideal partner? How would you describe yourself? Interests, extrovert, introvert, openness, just things around that realm. And then after collecting that data, Paul Eastwick brought all of the participants into this environment to have like a speed dating round. So each of them had a 4-minute date with another person, and they kind of rotated throughout those 4 minutes. And after the study concluded, they asked each of the participants who they liked the most or who they'd like to see again. So basically, who did you find yourself to be most compatible with? And very sadly so, they found that these surveys and personality tests, in fact, cannot predict compatibility. So there will be no mailing of perfect men to the doorstep.
Dang.
Yeah,
I was looking
it's
forward
really
to
upsetting, but I'm not surprised. I feel like having that kind of two-dimensional information on paper really wouldn't
really flattens out the complexity that
exactly.
includes dating.
Yeah, and who includes a person as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to just describe through yes and no questions.
Sounds very depersonalizing.
Exactly. It does sound very depersonalizing. Beyond kind of like the more niche apps and the apps that make those false claims, the one that's most popular, especially with people under 40, is an app called Tinder. Do you want to describe Tinder?
Sure. So it's essentially a swiping app. It shows you a picture, short description of somebody. You get to swipe through, make some choices. You can also list a few things about yourself, make a few limitations as far as how far you're okay with somebody being, whether you're looking for short-term, long-term friends, just fun.
Mm-hmm. They
Preferences.
Have that age range in there too.
The age range. What else is there?
I think you about covered it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot more like elements of it the more you kind of explore through the app, but I feel like you covered kind of like the basic use that we all have like a general knowledge of. But yeah, I wanted to dive deeper into just like Tinder as a whole, and I was actually quite surprised. Well, I shouldn't have been surprised to see that there was a research study done on Tinder, but it's just not necessarily something I would have thought of before. So digging into this was actually quite fun. It was a study conducted by Lauren Palmer. She conducted a study via interviews to just kind of learn people's interactions with Tinder, experiences, notions, thoughts, ideas, connotations, all the above. So it was just a lot of informative interviews and a lot of qualitative and mostly qualitative data that was collected. One of the first things and the most like strong conclusions that she came to is that a lot of people criticize Tinder for casual sex. They don't like that it favors instant gratification and convenience, and there's just like that still very negative connotation surrounding casual sex. I've definitely heard of Tinder being like a casual sex app. That's definitely been something that's floated around, especially in our age range, that use of it. But when I think about the criticizing that goes on revolving casual sex, I also think about the sexual liberation, where we like people marched and protest for like the freedom to do as they please with their body, whether that's casual sex, waiting till marriage, or whatnot. It was like opening up the door to these choices. And I feel like people that choose casual sex, or people may be more afraid to be open about casual sex or like their interaction with that activity, because there's still such a stigma around it, you know? There's still very much so a negative stigma around that. Anywho, I wanted to look in to more specifically in this study why casual sex is criticized, and one word that I came to a lot and I found a lot was shame, which we kind of just discussed. I found that a lot of people felt shame because we hold more traditional values in today's dating sphere than it appears. So when I say traditional values, I'm referring to like romance, commitment, kind of like the heteronormative format of a relationship. And that may, for some people's values, extend to how you meet. So maybe online dating is outside of those traditional values as a whole, or maybe for some people, online dating can fit into traditional values just fine. I was quite surprised to see that they found in this study that a lot of people still hold those traditional values.
Well, I kind of do also, because I did actually get into a relationship through Tinder a couple years back. And when it came to telling my parents about how we met, I was like, yeah, we met at a party. He had some friends there, and I got very extensive with the lie. I had to go, it had to sound believable.
Yeah.
Anything but Tinder, though.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I also found another statistic from Vogue and McLean's 2023 research article that said 44% of online dating users are actually looking for long-term partners. And I don't know if it's maybe because I typically use an app more so aimed towards short-term partners or like casual sex, but I thought that was really interesting. I feel like because people don't talk about it as much, we don't know that people use it in the ways that they do because there's so much stigma surrounding it that nobody wants to be the first to say it. But we're all doing it.
Yeah.
We're all doing it.
And I do also think it's interesting because being on Tinder, most of what you find or get into are situations where hookups are kind of the expectation. So to hear that percentage makes it sound
right,
very surprising.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that one as well. One thing that I found while just investigating the Tinder app as a whole a little bit more than I typically have is that they have a lot of things that help people who are looking for different things know what other people on the app are looking for. So kind of clarify what Paula mentioned a little bit earlier. You can kind of specify if you're looking for short-term fun, not sure, long-term relationship, and that'll just kind of like pop up as a little icon, I think, on your profile.
On the description, yeah.
So as people are like looking through and swiping, they can see not only this is their name, this is their age, how far away they are, but this is also like the kind of relationship that they're looking for right now. And I think that that's really helpful. There's also different categories that you can click on, sort of like communities, and they're specified for certain things. Like there's one that's for like coffee dates or whatnot, so you can go swipe on a or like on in a little community where other people are looking for a coffee date. Or there's also like free tonight, looking for love. So like beyond putting what you're looking for in your description, you can actually dive into like those other communities and like find other similar minded people through that. Exactly. The one thing about all of this information and all of the availability on this app is that it can feel very overwhelming. Like all of the options and all of the interaction and all of the swiping can just feel like a lot. And I guess I'm not alone in that. I found, well, I'm sure we are not alone in that, but I found that according to Vogue and McLean's 2023 Pew Research study, women who have used online dating platforms tend to be overwhelmed by the number of messages they receive. And I say I'd agree with that. If you just, well, especially if they're all like around the same thing or corny pickup lines and they're all just looking at you, do you really want to respond? Do you truly?
Yeah, most times out of not.
Not.
I chose to not.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of going off of that repetitive nature that I was talking about, another study conducted by Hovert in 2016 suggests that meeting people so frequently and rapidly online can start to make the interactions that you're having feel scripted. And I feel like that really resonated with like my experiences on dating apps thus far. You know, someone will say hey, and then you'll say hey, and then they'll say, what are you doing? Nothing much. You? Nothing much. Cool. Here's my Snapchat. It just gets into this there's steps to this process. It doesn't feel like you're getting to know this person. But then again, nobody's like forcing you to this script, which I guess can be argued too, but it just kind of becomes the norm of it.
Yeah. Everybody, I feel like there's just this background knowledge of what you're doing there.
Yeah. There's a lot of assumptions.
Yes.
And then another researcher, Illouz, conducted a study in 2012 that claims the abundance of options and choices is kind of what's making us less likely to like make a choice, especially in looking for a monogamous relationship. They argue that we're a lot less likely to find that given all these choices. But then again, maybe our standards were just on the floor before.
Exactly.
I think that's one thing that isn't completely acknowledged in that statement.
I agree. A lot of the times why I chose not to respond was because I was just looking for more than just a very, very cheesy pickup line.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, put a little bit of effort into it. I want to see that you're actually interested in what I seem to be interested in. Yes. But yeah, just in relevance to the abundance keeping us from making a choice, I think it can just give you more experience in general and kind of give you a better idea of what you want. I do think the abundance can make you more indecisive for some reasons relating to like, there's just so much available. There's ought to be something better. But I think there's also something to say for the fact that more experience helps you gauge what you're more looking for in a person and a relationship, and it makes it easier to decipher if a situation or a relationship isn't like satisfying what you're looking for. And yeah, so kind of going off of like the whole hookup culture of it, there was also in what was her name? Tender. Paloma. Lauren Palmer. Sorry. In Lauren Palmer's study, she, in some of the interviews, she found that some of the participants reported that the frequency of the sex made it feel a lot less meaningful to them. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I agree to some extent with that statement. But another participant from the study raised a really great counterpoint. They said that it's most likely an individual's negative viewpoint and subsequent actions are the things resulting in their dissatisfaction with sex rather than the app itself, which makes a lot of sense. It's not necessarily the place that the action is taking place as much as it is the action. So whether or not it's Tinder that you're finding these people, or at a club or through a friend or family member. I think those who are more likely to have one night stands frequently on like online dating apps, I think kind of similar to like online addictions like online shopping and online gambling, that's an issue that would be present regardless of those available platforms. But yeah, I don't think Tinder is necessarily something that can be completely blamed for people's sexual dissatisfaction.
I think it's still choices that you make. If anything, I do kind of see a try on their behalf to minimize those kinds of conflicts where they offer you, where you label what you're looking for, what you prefer, and
I feel like there's just a lot of, like you said, ways to communicate that with just opening with that conversation, what you're looking for, what you're interested in, what your boundaries are. I think a lot of those potentially negative effects of it could really easily be avoided by proper communication and just like being open about what you're looking for and whatnot. Another negative thing that people had to say in Lauren Palmer's study was that they never know someone's motive, which is pretty similar to what we were just talking about. But again, how do you know someone's motive if you met them at the grocery store? They could be just as likely to be a polyamorous, like maybe you're looking for a monogamous relationship. They could be just as non-monogamous as the guy you met on Tinder. I feel like it's very perception and connotation based, that we just build these associations in our minds, you know? But moving on to one issue that is, I would argue, has kind of come about through the internet and has become especially prevalent through like online dating, is catfishing. Especially with like Photoshop and AI, it can be to such a far extent. There's so many things that you can and probably should question while using dating apps. What is your method for making sure you're not getting catfished?
I didn't pick up on this till an incident where someone I met did not look how I thought they would. But I remember you suggesting using the Snapchat method, where you just get a picture of each other and it just confirms a lot of the questions.
Exactly.
Would have liked to have known that before I made the mistake.
Well, especially on Snapchat, you have to, if you sent like an already existing picture, it just comes up in the chat. So if they take the picture right now, it'll show up. As they, yes.
It lets you know when it's a present picture versus an old picture.
Exactly. Sometimes when they don't have Snapchat and they're just sending me a plain old picture of them, my thing I go to is send me a picture with a spoon on your head. Because if they're just using some stock picture, or maybe if it's even their friend or someone they've gotten the pictures from Instagram, I highly doubt that there is a photo with a spoon on their head. It just seems like a great method.
Yeah.
It's never steered me wrong.
I thought it was very successful.
It is. I'd highly recommend it to anybody else trying to avoid catfishing. But kind of going off of catfishing, online dating, or like at least taking online dating offline, can be really scary because you don't actually know who this person is. Like, the internet provides such a shield where they could be putting up a complete facade. So beyond the precautions you can take to make sure that they look like what they say they look like, they might still have some bad intentions. So what are some of your, like, what are some ways that you try and protect yourself when meeting people from online?
I tend to keep my location on for you and Lily, your other roommate. Otherwise, the pepper spray is a carry on me.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
yeah. What do
Um,
you use?
I also keep my pepper spray on my keys, and
Mhm.
just in case I need to like put my keys through the fingers, those are there too.
Mhm.
Location definitely, and if I'm really not sure about them, I'll make sure that the first time I meet them is in like a very public space or in a group setting. Like whatever it is, we're not going on a forest walk.
Yes.
I'm sorry. We can bird watch
Let's avoid
after
that.
I know you're kind of cool. But yeah, those are definitely some things that I take into consideration. But apart from safety, I feel like the biggest issue with online dating sites is really just the stigma and shame that still surrounds them. I think we're still getting to a point where it's becoming more socially acceptable to find partners this way, and it's also kind of associated with the idea of casual sex. So just still moving forward with like sexual freedom and liberation into the acceptance of society, I think is really where the stigma is coming from.
I feel like it also comes from, it's almost like a, what do you call it? Like a backup plan. Like if you fail at dating traditionally,
Exactly.
then you can resort to online dating. So just letting other people know kind of seems like an acceptance of failure at doing it a traditional way.
Exactly. Like I failed finding people the quote unquote right or natural way. Yeah, I really like the way you described that. Something that kind of just helps re-perpetuate that though, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, the ex that you had met online and introduced your parents and told that you met at a party with a way too specific lie. I found in Polymer's study that a lot of people who have gotten into relationships with people through online dating tend to lie to like friends and relatives about where they met. And I get it because the stigma is still there, and I do the same thing. I've done the same thing. I have most definitely done the same thing. But I feel like that stigma is just going to continue to spin in this vicious cycle where it's more popular, sure, but it's nobody knows. It's kind of like an undercover operation, you know?
Which is interesting because in a way it has kind of a parallel to Instagram almost, where it's like you can view a person, you can view a few things about them. You don't necessarily see their status. You can see their status, actually. Some people put it on their bios, and other information about them. And you can contact them through Instagram. Like, slide in their DMs or something.
Exactly.
And it's not considered the same thing as Tinder, even though there's a lot of parallels in that.
Yeah. Like, a lot of people use those social media apps for the same purposes as the apps that were literally built and designed for that. Yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, Polymer also found in her study that when people, because Polymer conducted the study via interviews, she found that when discussing like casual sex or like online dating app users as a whole, people would kind of use an us versus them narrative to continue to distance themselves from it. So if they were describing how people use dating apps, they would say they rather than we, even though they partake in it as well, which I thought was interesting too. I think that also ties into maybe some of the shame or like stigma around casual sex or like anything outside of traditional heteronormative relationships, but I do think it kind of makes sense that with the uncomfortableness and uncertainty of it, that we kind of try to distance ourselves from it. But that doesn't help with the stigma that's being built around it.
It reinforces it.
Exactly.
In a very subtle way, but it does.
I feel like, in a way, our dating sphere has kind of shifted through these casual relationships or like hookups and whatnot, from maybe instead of meeting your parents before you have sex to having sex then going on a first date. Like, everything's just kind of swapped around. We're learning that we don't necessarily need to adhere to this pattern, even if it is the socially acceptable form of doing it. But online dating definitely, I feel, opens up a lot more doors in general. There's some dangers and some precautions that we need to take, but overall I think it really just helps us to widen that social sphere to help find not only potential partners but like-minded people.
So, yeah. And a lot of those dangers that are there are also just present anywhere.
Exactly. Well, thanks for chatting with us today about online dating. I hope you enjoyed.